I don't think the future is like more cowbell. It's not like more and more AI and more. It's like, how do we just make this kind of pervasive and accepted and expected, whether I'm at home, whether I'm out on a trail run, or whether I'm in my favorite gym or in my favorite studio.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Krissy Vann. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. In today's episode, we welcome Stephen Webster, someone who prides themselves on living in the land of never been done before. As the CEO of Asensei, he's at the forefront of using motion capture technology to create personalized health and fitness experiences, enhancing customer engagement and retention. On the episode, Stephen shares how his martial arts background has been crucial in shaping his entrepreneurial spirit, teaching valuable lessons in resilience and adaptability. He discusses the challenges of growing a startup and the importance of conviction in fundraising. Plus, the episode looks ahead at the future of connected fitness, providing insights into its promising advancements. I'm Krissy Vann, your host of All Things Fitness and Wellness. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. I host new podcasts weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. This is ATFW. Well, I am so appreciative to have Stephen Webster joining me here, the CEO of Asensei. And Stephen, I was looking into your background here, and prior to even hopping on to the podcast, I was talking about how one of the things I appreciate so much about this industry is no matter how much success someone sees, they're still very rooted to their why. Why do they care about getting more people moving? Why do they care about adding more technology into this space and helping people function better and reach those goals? So we're going to start way back to when young Stephen maybe connected with fitness for the first time and felt it resonate. So what was that for you? Because I know you've got some serious accolades around your belt, quite literally.
There you go. I like what you did there. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation. But I grew up in Scotland. I grew up kind of halfway between Edinburgh and St Andrews, the home of golf, right? So no, I'm not a good golfer.
You and me both.
My childhood is defined by the sports that I played. You know, when I think back to being a kid, you know, I played every day football, soccer, but football and hockey, like ice hockey, street hockey, representing Canada there. I know I knew more NHL players than a Scottish kid should. If I wasn't on the pitch or I wasn't on the rink, I was in the water. I was windsurfing and kayaking, but my passions were martial arts. I got picked on at school, and so my parents packed me off to a judo class. I think I was 7, and so judo and then jiu-jitsu, and that was my obsession. That was what I woke up every day wanting to be good at and wanting to be better at. I've often said that fitness is never something I did; it was something I got for free, just being kind of super excited about sport.
Well, and I think what you speak to there, and we don't need to live in it too much, but is a really relatable experience for a lot of adults that look back to their childhood and have faced. I mean, it's one thing to be picked on, but being bullied and things like that is a terrible thing to overcome. And so, how great for your parents to be like, sport, that's the thing that's going to be the change. And it obviously shaped you because you didn't stop with martial arts. What's this? UK's youngest jiu-jitsu black belt. Is that true?
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. Like I said, judo kind of jiu-jitsu became my passion as a kid. I was training like 4 or 5 times a week, and when I was 13-ish, I was ready for black belt. But the challenge was, by the time I passed it, I'd be 14, and then I would have to go back again when I was 16. So my instructor spoke to the federation, you know, that we graded with. Was like, look, this kid plus the 3 kids he trains with, they could do the adult test. And so we got permission to do the adult test. I mean, we stood in a room with the adults, adult, Scottish, American. We stood in a room with the adults and we graded with them. And June 4th, 1988, I don't forget the day ever, is as a 14-year-old, you know, somebody untied a brown belt from my waist, threw it into the corner and tied a black belt on my waist. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm an entrepreneur in California building a company. So a pithy one-liner I like to use is, if you can show people their athletic potential, you can show them their human potential. You unlock more than just a talent in sport. And that, you know, fitness and sport is a very honorable way in to kind of just realizing your capability more generally.
I love that metaphor. I actually used an example of exactly that with an individual that was going through a hard time right now, and they are quite athletic in the gym space. And I had to remind them and say, "You've already proven to yourself that you have the tools. You actually have the evidence of what you are capable of." And I think
Right.
that's so tremendous of this industry because it does give us that.
And that's funny. And I was at Adobe. So I sold my first company to Adobe,
Just
and
a
I love
casual mention there.
casual dropped that in there, which was great. Like it was, I started this design and engineering consultancy. Adobe and Micromedia were one of our key partners. We used their technology, and all of a sudden, I'm working for Adobe, and I'm like one of the leadership team of their worldwide consulting organization. It was, professionally, I learned more in that transition than I've learned at any other part of my career, other than now at Asensei. But I definitely had my, that story, Steve Jobs, like, do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? I had my sugared water moment at Adobe, because Adobe kind of made this pivot, and I love Adobe and I love where they are now, and my dearest friends are there. But there was a period of time where we were like just acquiring ad tech, marketing tech company after another. And it was very soulless to me. It was taking the creativity out of creativity. It was all just like, well, we don't need design and designers. We'll just use data to decide what color something should be. And I had this moment of like, what am I doing? Like, my parents didn't, scrap and save for me to go to university. So I was in ad tech. And so I decided, I want to do something in kind of health or fitness or something meaningful. And then I was just randomly, I was in New York for work. And as I often do, because I taught a university karate club, I taught Edinburgh University Karate Club. I just put this note out to the diaspora, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to be in New York. If anybody's around, as often happens, if anybody's around, I'd love to catch up for a drink. So I don't know if you know the Standard Hotel or the Standard Grill in New York, but I was at the Standard Grill with a couple of my students, one who was living in New York trying to become an actor, and he ended up in fight choreography and in movies with like Jackie Chan and Matt Damon. And then another of my students, Melissa, who's now very senior in the BBC in their digital production team. And I sat with them, and they'd not seen each other for years either. And so we just got to this conversation that I realized I'd had several times before with several different students. And when we got into this sort of nostalgic reminiscing of our time in the club together, it was this common theme of, you know what, I came to Edinburgh University to study law or medicine or engineering, but I learned more in the dojo and more on the mat and more in the team and more in competitions that I take on in my life. And I still talk about these lessons I learned, in the karate dojo. And I talk about them way more than my law lecture or my medicine lecture. And that was my sugared water moment. That was the blinding flash of the obvious of like, I'm not a doctor. I can't start a health tech company per se. But what if I could scale coaching? Like a problem that I lived as an athlete and as a coach. Like, what if coaching could be digital? But to do that, you have to solve a fundamental problem. Like, if as a coach, if you can't see people, you can't coach them. So how do you solve for that? But that was the beginning of the itch of, this is the problem in the world that I kind of feel like uniquely, excited to solve right now. This is like 2012.
Well, and that's like the proverbial call of entrepreneurship right
Right.
there, where you're like, there is a question in front of me that I know could change the world and people if I answer. So you get the itch. It's one thing to have that, it's another thing to listen and actually pursue that. So, what was the process to actually bringing this company to life?
Well, it's funny because, yeah, I mean, as a recovering entrepreneur, right? You always have ideas, and every time something happens in your life, you're like, there's an app for that, or there's a technology solution. But it's your like bad instinct. But the thing about Asensei, and I've only felt this a few times in my life, and once I didn't act on it, and it became Mint.com, and I wish that had been me.
Oh, you know what? That becomes the motivator for when you know you
Right,
need to take the
I
leap.
was this close to starting that
A little
company.
painful though.
Um, on a beach in Barcelona, I decided not to. Wrong
I
decision.
mean, those
Um,
Barcelona beaches will get you, in fairness.
but listen, with Asensei, when I kind of got to it very quickly became panic. Like, if I don't do this, someone else is going to do it. Like this urgency. And again, this is like 2012, 2013, 2014. And, you know, people are trying to imitate us left, right, and center right now and still can't. But I just panic of if I don't like drop tools and start doing this now, someone else is going to do it. It's so damn obvious that this problem needs to be solved. And at Microsoft, I was working with the inventors of Kinect and HoloLens and Xbox Fitness and Cortana intelligent agents, and the quantified self was a thing, and Fitbit was huge, and just all of these technology forces were acting, and they were all pointing at the same thing that I cared about of, you know, at which point can we teach a machine to watch and perceive and understand a human's movement, and then turn around and coach and correct and, you know, steer them along a path the same way a coach would, or on behalf of a coach. So Microsoft was kind of that final moment for me of like, all of this stuff exists, and it's never going to happen in a company like Microsoft because it takes forever. Kicking off a new business that is not $1 billion business straight off the bat is like really hard. And so that's how I ended up I got to do this. I got to quit my job. And my two co-founders, you know, so 2014, we incorporated the company a few months after my son was born. So
just a slightly busy time in life
transition.
No big deal.
I was like, I turned to my wife. I was like, I'm going to do it. You know, and we talked about it. It's not like I sprung it on her, but it's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to quit Microsoft. And she's like, I'm pregnant. Yeah.
And then there was probably a lot more conversation that ensued.
Yeah, I think I stayed a couple of extra quarters to vest a little bit more stock. That was the bootstrap finance. But as you know, as soon as I decided I wanted to start the company, it's like Ocean's 11. You've got to assemble this kind of weird team of crackpots, right? And my two co-founders to this day, Ross, I've known Ross since we were 18. We were classmates and flatmates together at university.
Right on.
We lived in the same house for 3 years. You know, kind of became best friends, and then sort of, you know, life just takes you like apart from each other. And then weirdly, when I left Scotland, I was like, hey, Ross, I'm moving to California. I'd love to catch up with you and your wife before we go. And Ross's wife and, you know, my now wife hit it off. And we ended up just becoming friends again after university. And, you know, Ross, chip designer, he's worked on like 70 plus chips for Apple iPods and Microsoft Kinect and Galaxy Gear watches. It's like, you're the hardware guy, you're the product guy. And one of my karate mentors or co-mentors, we kind of, you know, I taught him jiu-jitsu and he taught me karate, and we kind of like, we were part of a very small group of instructors all over the UK. We'd get together and coach and train together. But Bill was also like one of the only other entrepreneurs that I knew. He built a speech recognition company that he took public in London, and he just exited. You know, he'd taken that company public and, you know, worked there for a number of more years, and then he just quit, thinking he's retired. And then I came to him with Asensei. And so the three of us,
damn it, I can't say no.
Next thing you know, we're a Delaware C Corp. There's 3 guys in 3 garages outside San Francisco, London, and Edinburgh. And that's how Asensei got started.
So obviously it is a medium that we're speaking on right now that people can't physically see the product. So can you do your best to kind of dial down and explain what it is and how it works?
Yeah. So think of Asensei, first of all, you can't see it. It's everywhere. Asensei is an ingredient technology. I want you thinking of us like an Intel processor or Dolby Audio or an NVIDIA GPU. We're the technology that other companies put inside their products to give it a superpower that they don't have the time or the money or the know-how to put in their product themselves. And because we created this category, we call it movement recognition, we're the leader. We're the most widely deployed solution. So our customers, I much prefer telling you about our customers than telling you about ourselves. So our customers are leading digital brands like Chris Hemsworth's Center, the recently announced Alter connected fitness mirror. You were speaking with Lise about Bouts, the boxing bag with the brain. And then we have legacy brands, you know, brands that you've known for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, like Power Block or Vertimax. And, you know, we power at-home fitness devices like connected fitness mirrors or set-top boxes on your TV or just a digital app on your phone. But we also power experiences in gyms and in studios, things that kind of elevate the member experience with these, I like to call them the tasteful touches of technology. It's not like, oh, in your face digital, but how can we elevate the experience? So I would say think of us like speech recognition, but for movement. So any sport, any fitness modality, physical therapy, even jumping around playing kind of physical exer games, they call them, right, in front of your TV, or VR and AR. And in all of those environments, we do three things. So I'll just quickly give you the three things.
Yeah, please.
So first is motion capture. Our first investors came from Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, the world of, motion capture and movie making. So we do that. We motion capture your skeleton in 3D in real time. Now we can do that with an ordinary camera. Just, the camera on my smartphone is enough for us to do that. We can also do it with sports apparel. We can put sensors in sports apparel where just by pulling on your shirt and your yoga pants, we're capturing your skeleton. But most of our customers are using cameras today, so we'll kind of stick there. Once we've captured your motion, the second thing we do is we've taught a machine to recognize and understand what you're doing. So are you doing a warrior two in yoga? Are you doing a plank? Are you throwing a left uppercut? Are you swinging a baseball bat? Asensei can recognize what you're doing and how well you're doing it. Now, some of the pioneers like Peloton or Tempo, they try to do this themselves, but they really struggle adding new exercises or adding new understanding of the exercise to their products because it takes them months of video capturing hundreds of people doing that exercise, training a machine learning kind of machine to understand that. And that's what most other companies try to do, and it just doesn't scale. So we have a very different approach that lets us add new exercises to our library in hours. And so unlike other movement recognition technologies, we also have this other concept, and it comes from our martial arts background. You'll see that background imbue our product. We have this kind of beginner to black belt approach to thinking about something. So it's not pass, fail, did you do the movement? It's much more of a, what were you trying to do? What should you have been doing? How well did you do it? And based on where you are right now and how well you're doing that exercise and how we like to coach that exercise, what should we tell you about? Like, what should we give you? What's that one thing that if I never coached you again, but I coached you this now and you absorb that coaching, you would leave here better than you came in. I mean, that's coaching. It's that repeat ad infinitum. That's how you coach, right?
Well, and it also helps people stick with it. Like, I like how you're saying, we're not going to show you step XYZ if you haven't mastered A. So let's start at A. So the fact that it can recognize, because how many times, if you think of the consumer then that's using the product, if all of a sudden this machine learning and this coaching is trying to get you to do that, you're going to give up. You're just going to give up.
No, I love that you said that and that you picked that up because, we say this all the time, progression is retention. And that's true, not even with technology. Like that's how I kept students in my club for 7 or 8 years. That's why a student would graduate with a bachelor's at Edinburgh University and choose to do their PhD at Edinburgh University because they wanted to keep doing karate. They wanted to be a first dan and a second dan and a third dan. And so if you can show the member, if you can show the athlete that progression, and if you can show them that they're on a path to that progression, not just that, I'll tell you when you get better, but I've got you, like I'll get you better. If you can put that ingredient inside your product, then that's how you solve for churn. That's how you solve for engagement. It's not what are all the bells and whistles that I can do that, trick you into coming back. And we know this as coaches, intrinsic motivation is much more powerful than extrinsic motivation. So if I can give you that intrinsic motivation that I had as a jiu-jitsu obsessed kid of like, I just deep down want to be better at this. I want to be good at this. I want to know that I can defend myself. I want to compete in a competition one day.
I want to be the youngest black belt in the UK.
yeah, exactly. And then, there's always like a next goal and a next goal. That's fundamentally the technology that we're giving to customers. But the last piece, the third piece, is the intelligence around coaching. So with so many technologies, we have all of this data, but we have this kind of so what, now what experience with it. Like, what am I going to do with this information? And a good coach distills that down into just the feedback you needed to hear. So we do one of two things. for the moments where the coach or the trainer or the instructor isn't in the room with you, you're practicing at home or you're practicing in the gym, but not in a personal training session. In those moments, we deliver the feedback directly to the individual. So it's like, and we can do that in an AI voice that sounds like a celebrity athlete or a celebrity coach.
Very
It's
cool.
like having a coach in the room over your shoulder watching you. But we're all coaches. We're not building Asensei to replace human coaches. I do believe that coaches that use products powered by Asensei will replace coaches that use products that aren't powered by Asensei. But when there's an expert in the room, physical therapist, personal trainer, pitching coach, Asensei is an assistant coach. Asensei can do the job of watching the athlete, of knowing the curriculum, of knowing the syllabus, of knowing past history. You've got this superpower, but the job of delivering that feedback to the athlete, that could still be the job of the coach. And so for a lot of our brick and mortar or sports-based experiences, Asensei is in that role of assistant, a coach, but delivering the information to the human so they can deliver it to their member or to their customer or to their client.
You said that you kind of started this journey 2014, and obviously technology, I mean, you know this better than anyone from the dot-com boom to now, it's not slowing down. So with that transition, with the adoption of AI, how much did it change what you were doing from the original concept? How much was it involved from the beginning, and how much has it evolved?
That's a great question. Catchphrase I stole from my last boss was never mistake a clear line of sight for a short distance, right? And
Fair.
so I should share with you the original video we filmed in 2014 for the company, Meet Asensei, your personal trainer who knows your every move, sensors throughout your clothing. I can still remember the 1-minute track. And when I go back and watch that video, the vision is exactly where we are today. That the fundamental idea, and I think it comes back to what you said about, because it connects strongly to the why, not the what, and not the how. So this fundamental idea that we would basically, give everybody access, democratize access to world-class coaching, that your movement would be tracked in real time, that we would do whatever we had to do to just give you the very simple experience of a voice in your ear telling you exactly what that coach would have told you. That hasn't changed. However, a couple of things. My point of view when I started the company was like, how am I going to do this motion capture? And I've been working very closely with Microsoft Kinect, which is a kind of very expensive camera system, an IR, infrared depth camera. And I just couldn't fathom that that was ever going to get small enough or cheap enough that it would fit in a phone. And I didn't like the idea that you were tethered to the TV. And so everybody's like, why don't you use cameras? I'm like, no, you guys are wrong. And I believe, and this is quite classic me. I'm a big believer in like having conviction that you hold loosely. So you can't be loosey-goosey and like, well, we'll chase two rabbits at once. It's like, no, I think the future is connected apparel. Remember, this is the time of Fitbit. This is the time of, Under Armour are sticking heart rate monitors in shirts and bras and everything's going inside the fabric. I'm like, that's the future that I want to will into existence. I want you to walk into Nike Town, buy a piece of a Nike golf shirt, powered by Asensei, that puts the voice of Tiger Woods or Serena Williams in tennis in your ear. That was the original vision for the company. And if we hadn't have done that, we wouldn't be the best in the industry right now, because that, I won't bore you with too much of the implementation detail.
I mean, you have the right audience. We're not a boring audience, but we get it.
I know, but I don't want to be the nerd guy in the middle. So
I mean, it's where your success came from. So again, nerd away. It's very welcome here.
No, but so I'll say this. I kind of touched on Tempo and Peloton, and I don't mean to pick on them because they did what almost everybody else tries to do as well,
Right.
which is let's give the machine images and videos of people doing things and ask the machine to understand the image. Because we started with connected apparel, connected clothing, there was no video or image. So when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So when all you have is a video, everything looks like a video processing computer vision problem. Whereas we had let's have an abstract representation of a skeleton, and let's teach the machine to understand the skeleton by teaching it to understand biomechanics, posture, and time. Like, human movement is just static postures, frames per second, and you move.
Right.
And any of us that have coached any sport, there's a setup position, there's an intermediate position. This is the position I want you at the end of the technique. There's timing, move your hip before you move your feet, move your hip before you move your hands. And so that's how we taught a machine to understand movement. And that just, long story short, that is the underlying reason why our approach is so much scalable and so much more accurate and so much more nuanced than people that are treating this like a vision problem. However, where I was wrong, I never imagined just how good this thing would get. I knew it was a supercomputer in your pocket.
He's holding up an iPhone, by the way.
I'm holding up an iPhone, yeah. I never knew, I never really anticipated just how good AI would get and just how good the sheer compute power on that phone would get.
In fairness, to pause you there, but I actually remember the first time, because I came from the land of BlackBerry in Ontario, and I remember the first time that somebody showed me a video for the iPhone before it was released, and obviously with touchscreen, and I looked at it and I was like, no way, that's not real. Like,
there's a whole movie about BlackBerry and you just basically gave the plot away, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, there's no way that's happening. And then, I mean, look at us now and our relationships with our phones.
Well, yeah. And
the fact that you were in the industry and also still underestimated just how far we'd be. I get it.
There's the famous video of Steve Ballmer mocking the iPhone. It doesn't even have a keyboard. It can't do email. It's like, how did that work out, Steve? So yeah, I hadn't anticipated the compute power, because what that fundamentally meant was you didn't need that expensive depth camera that the Kinect sensor had. You could just use what we call an RGB, a red, green, blue camera on the phone, and you could, software your way out of the problem, not hardware your way out of the problem. And so 3 or 4 years ago, we decided we think computer vision is going to be a credible alternative to connected apparel and an easier on-ramp for customers. It's just easier to get started with the camera people already have. And so we made the decision to embrace computer vision, but we've rapidly outperformed the state of the art, because what we do with that computer vision is we turn it into a skeleton, and Asensei doesn't know whether that skeleton came from, Tiger Woods' Nike golf shirt, or that skeleton came from an iPhone camera, or that skeleton came from a TV. It's just a skeleton with posture over time. And so, that's really kind of fundamental to how we think about solving movement recognition and motion capture.
Well, it's pretty amazing to think of where you've come. And I kind of want to lead us into past, and then I'll go future. So on past, you talk about how the idea landed in your brain. You make this bold decision. Your wife's pregnant at the time. So your lives are going to be changing in this big way. And innately you were like, I got to do this. And then all of a sudden, all these players in your life that just fit the puzzle pieces perfectly come together, and boom, we're doing this. Was it as obvious to other people when you were looking for investors, like the same level of conviction, like, yeah, why didn't anyone think about this? Or because connected fitness was evolving and emerging, did you face the opposite? What was that experience like?
I hope they're watching.
Ooh, it means it's gonna be good.
We had investors in Fitbit pass on us because they thought we would be competitive with Fitbit. I don't know if you remember Athos, who were putting muscle sensing sensors, and Chamath, who was one of the investors or owners of the Golden State Warriors. He put 15 million into Athos, and every investor in the Valley was like, it's game over. Chamath's given 15 million to Athos, a Canadian-based company, Waterloo. I would look at a lot of these companies and be like, don't you see they're technology solutions in search of problems? Or they're not problems looking for solutions. So yeah, I mean, just generally, especially when connected apparel was our go-to-market, investors hate CapEx. They hate their money going into tooling and plastic and Shenzhen and electronics and logistics. So being a hardware business made it impossibly hard to raise money. We're before Peloton. I mean, I crowdfunded the Peloton bike. I saw Peloton. I was like, finally, I'm not the only one talking about this stuff. But then, of course, investors like, well, how are you going to compete against Peloton? It's like, we're not competing against Peloton. It's like this idea that Amazon exists, so Walmart are never going to be able to sell online ever, even though they're bigger online retailer than Amazon and certain categories. So no, we just had, like most companies, quite frankly, we had an impossible time. You kiss a lot of frogs when you're fundraising. Here's the double-edged sword. If there's nobody else in your category, people don't believe in the category.
Right.
And as soon as there's 2 or 3 well-funded players in your category, like Peloton and, I don't know who else, Tonal or Active or whomever was around at the time, so, well, they're going to win the category. It's like there's no middle ground. And so it was very hard to convince people to raise money. But this is the deal in early stage startups. This is the game you sign up to play. You kiss a lot of frogs, you get a lot of no's, and your job is to find the few people that have conviction. And we were super fortunate that KB Partners, a new sports tech fund out of Chicago, the partners there, they got it. And so they gave us our first institute, we scraped along with, $25,000 checks for 2 or 3 years, just not paying the founders, but paying other people to help us, get something to market. But our first institutional money came from KB Partners. We now have 76 Capital and Shuffle Capital, 2 other great kind of health and sport tech funds. So, at the end of the day, you have to have enough people around you with conviction. But I love that saying that $1 from a customer is worth $10 from an investor. And so that's really been our focus. And, that's the thing I'm most proud of. I remember meeting an investor who also didn't invest. I remember meeting an investor who said, we see a lot of companies trying to do motion capture and motion recognition. Why is it you're the only one that's got any customers or any customers we've ever heard of? And so that's been our focus, is like, let the work speak for itself, let our customers deliver the experience that's powered by Asensei, and all else follows that.
Well, and I think that as one of the OGs in this connected category, you clearly nailed it because it has grown. And so those ones that were your yeses, I'm sure, are getting happier and happier as the momentum continues to build.
Exactly.
So for yourself, when you think of the future of connected fitness, and I know that that's a broad question, but what do you see in your mind's eye? Where are we heading?
I love technology that disappears. Like, my favorite technologies are just part of the fabric, no pun intended, but they're part of the fabric of our life. DVR versus VCR, great example. Like, my son's 9. The concept of like going away on vacation for 2 weeks, and so we better program the VCR to record our favorite show. And if the news runs late, it won't record. And
Devastating. Devastating. They will never know the devastation.
Half the people watching this podcast are, what does he mean? I don't understand the problem.
I feel your pain, at least.
But then the DVR is like, record every Golden State Warriors game, the end, and it's just done. And so I think, the future for connected health and fitness is that technologies like Asensei kind of fade to black. They disappear into the background. I don't want to be touching these cold black slabs of glass, to do my workout. I don't necessarily want to be tethered to a screen long term. I just want to know that my effort is being noticed, and it's being noticed by somebody that understands whether I'm getting better, getting worse. Should I be trying this? Should I be hanging out in this stretch a little longer? Should I be doing this drill to isolate some part of my technique? So I think about us as an invisible technology. And by being invisible, it can be pervasive and everywhere. We always have this like VHS versus Betamax. We always have this Flash versus HTML. In person versus at home is my view has always been physical is going to get more digital and digital is going to get more physical. And Asensei is that connective tissue for omni-channel experiences. We also want to think about how do we elevate, again, I said it earlier, these tasteful touches of technology. How do we elevate the experience inside a studio so that my heart rate isn't the only thing you can put on a leaderboard or give me kudos and congratulations for? Recognize my reps, recognize my fatigue, reward me for good technique over bad technique, tell me to drop weights, recognize that I've picked up a heavier weight and, recommend I maybe, drop my reps and focus on this aspect of my form. Tell a coach on the floor that Steven's sitting on a rowing machine and he has no business being on the rowing machine the way he's rowing, and go over and teach him a pause at finish drill so that he gets the coordination correct. So there's so many Another one that we love and that we're deploying in brick and mortar facilities is what we call a smart warm up. Just go up and warm up over there in front of that TV that's telling you, here's your active warm up. Don't make me do some clinical movement assessment. Hold this pose for 3 seconds, drop down here. Asensei knows what you're doing, recognizes the difference between the bottom of a squat and the top of a squat. So we'll do all of that stuff that as a coach, I just did because I'm a human being with the best neural network on the planet, or one of the best, one of 5 billion of the best. But, a coach naturally looks over at people warming up and is like, Stephen looks like his hips are a little tight today. So let's just, hey, everyone, let's move on to a pigeon stretch and let's just open up those hips a little. So we can deliver that kind of tasteful digital experience in a physical environment. So I don't think the future is like more cowbell. It's not like more and more AI and more. It's like, how do we just make this kind of pervasive and accepted and expected? Whether I'm at home, whether I'm out on a trail run, or whether I'm in my favorite gym or in my favorite studio.
Great response and bonus points for the more cowbell mention for sure.
Need a little bit.
Right. Well, Stephen, honestly, I've so enjoyed learning about your story, and I really love ones. I mean, it's just cool. I start a lot of the times finding out people's route because, again, every single time it impresses me so much how connected people in this industry really are to those beginnings. How much that served you, though, is probably what was my most surprising takeaway through this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And like also those people that really reweaved back into your life from the students in New York City to your pal that you had connected with that became part of the trio. So
Right.
using your coaching background, I love to kind of leave people with a little nugget of wisdom or something that we can take with us to fuel our day. So what do you have for us, Coach?
A nugget of wisdom. I was kind of known as a coach. Anybody that trained with me for like more than 3 years would roll their eyes like, here he goes again. When ignorance is mutual, confidence is king. It's not the biggest that eats the smallest. It's the fastest that eats the slowest. So I've always had these kind of, things I've picked up along the way. But I think rather than share one nugget, because I have so many,
Please
rather
do.
than share one, I think just philosophically, being a sport coach has served me well. Building teams like karate teams and teams of male and female, beginner and senior forms and fighting, kata and kumite. Those have all been things that have served me well in building a culture inside a company the size of Adobe or in a company the size of Asensei, and attracting talent. And when investors ask me, well, what are you going to do if Google, enters your business? It's like, it's not the biggest that eats the smallest. It's the fastest that eats the slowest. Like, bring it. I'm not scared of Google. I'm a little scared of Google, but for other reasons. That would be my leave behind, is running through the DNA of Asensei. We're all coaches. And we're coach first, athlete second, technology last. With many of our customers, they come to us because they've heard we've got the best SDK, they've heard we've got the best technology. But why they stick with us is we understand them and we understand their customer, because we are them and we are their customer. And so I think the nugget I would leave anyone starting a business is, if you want to be in the sports and fitness business, you better be passionate about sport and fitness and not passionate about convolutional neural networks and pose estimation. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's like, how can you deliver the best imaginable coaching experience at digital scale? And I love waking up every day solving that problem. That's my nugget.
Oh, I love that. Stephen Webster, thank you so much for joining us on All Things Fitness and Wellness. I genuinely enjoyed the conversation so much.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Krissy Vann. This episode was brought to you by Fitness World, your fitness, your way. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.